On today's episode with guest Todd Barriage, we will be discussing music production and engineering, life in the studio, and how mental health can take its toll on productivity and life in general. With over 100 albums and 30-plus bands under his belt, we will discuss how it's okay to suck and what it takes for your music to go from dream to reality. All this and more coming at you on today's episode of The Bomb with Ozzy Napalm. Welcome back to The Bomb with Ozzy Napalm, the most explosive podcast in Kingston, Ontario. And friends, you could be listening to anything right now, but you're here on The Bomb, and just let you know that means the world to me. Today, I am joined by a former bandmate, former roommate, and going on 15-year friend, Todd Barriage. Todd, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So just for those listening today who don't know you as intimately as I do, just give us a quick blurb of who you are and what is it that you do.
All right. Well, my name is Todd Barriage. I'm a producer, and that's what I do. I take musical ideas, whether they're from my own head or other artists, and I make them a reality.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you specified right there the difference between producing and, say, just audio engineering.
Yeah, they're totally different things. Engineering is the skill set that a producer either needs to have themselves or they need to hire someone to make the vision a reality, but the producer is the person who sort of sees things through. I consider it sort of like how a director is in movies, a producer is to audio.
Oh, that's a great analogy, actually. Really paints the picture of what you do in the studio. And I'm sure we'll touch on it again later, but exactly like you said, you help the ideas come to life. And I remember even in one of our recording experiences, all I pretty much had were chords and lyrics. We got that recorded, and what you were able to turn that into was just mind-blowing from just what I was able to kind of tell you that I wanted it to sound like. I'm talking about Never Everland, of course.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, I told you I wanted that choir-esque sound,
yes.
And you knocked it out of the park.
Man, well, thanks. I see, when I told you earlier when we were speaking personally off the podcast, and I was like, I don't remember anything I've done, I forgot about that, but that was awesome.
Well, and it's got to be hard when you've just done so much. Like, I've personally been in the restaurant industry for 12 plus years now, and I couldn't tell you what the first special I ever came up with was. I couldn't tell you what I made on a big, busy Valentine's night, so it's absolutely understandable that you're going to forget some of the things you've worked on.
I've actually never thought about it the way that you just put it, because like in the moment, everything I'm working on is like the only thing that exists. So later on, like years down the road, when I inevitably forget something, I always feel like really terrible, but that frames it in a way that lets me forgive myself.
And you've worked with so many people, it must be nice when you get a moment like this, when they remind you of something you've worked on.
Yeah, and it floods back in, and I'm like super proud of having done it. And it's like, holy shit, yeah, like that was really awesome what we did.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. Now, I've known you, like I said, about 15 years now, but when we met, you were already what I would have considered a very talented musician. How long have you actually been playing music for?
18 years.
So you'd started a few years before we met there.
Yeah, in, 8th grade, so that would have been 2003, 2004, I got my first drum set. So from that moment on, it's been music all day, every day.
Drums were the first for you?
Yes.
What led you to want to play the drums out of everything else?
I was a fidgety kid growing up. I was raised Pentecostal, and music is a big part of that religion. So right. I was always gravitated towards the drummers, and I thought they just did the coolest stuff, and their instrument looked like a lot of fun, so I was always banging on stuff with pencils. So when inevitably, after getting into punk music after the Tony Hawk games, it's punk music. The drums are what makes the fast music go fast. So I just, I wanted to be the gas pedal in whatever band I was.
Well, that's awesome that you actually had an attachment to a specific instrument, because very similar. I've been a bassist for about a decade now, I would say. And what led me to it was my dad was into classic rock, and I always remembered attaching to the bass lines. And one day we were sitting down, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. They're going to hit me with a copyright. Led Zeppelin. We were listening to Dazed and Confused, and I just remember asking him, what is making that sound? It's making me feel sad. And I was younger than I should have been to be getting emotionally charged by music, but just remember the bass moved me in such a way. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to play that instrument that was making me feel that way. So it's kind of awesome you have the same attachment with drums.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, over time, like every 6 months, I was picking up a new instrument for the same reasons. Like, my favorite band growing up was AFI. And so the second instrument I picked up was bass, because AFI has really awesome bass lines. And it was the same deal. The song Death of Seasons has this, just crazy long, it's like a minute of pretty much just bass. And I remember that making me feel like, oh my God, like this is building up to something. This is hype. I want to learn that song. So I learned bass.
Well, I'm not even a big AFI fan myself. Their bass player is phenomenal. So absolutely understand there why that would make you want to pick up the instrument.
Yeah, they're a weird band like that, because I fully understand why. And anyone who's ever told me like, oh, I'm not big into AFI, I'm not like, oh, you're nuts, they're so good. Like, I totally get it. They're a weird, quirky, acquired taste. But like on an individual basis, each member of that band does the thing they do like really well.
Well, the best analogy I've ever heard describe a band was the bass player from the metal band Mastodon. He described it as a bed. So the drummer is the frame. You can't have the rest of the bed without the bed frame. The bass player is the box spring, and that's the foundation that goes in the frame. They work together perfectly. The guitar players are the mattress. It gives you that padding, something you can really sink into. And then the vocals are the blankets and the pillows, that extra fluff on top. And when I heard that, that's kind of how I've described a band setup since then. And so though I might have a favorite instrument, bass, I've dabbled in guitar. Though I really can't. I've played drums a few times. I can't. It blows my mind that drummers can have their limbs all move in a different time signature.
Honestly, it blows mine too. Like, even though I do it, I was filming a video for a cover song, and while recording or filming rather the drum part, I decided it would be cool to start singing when the singing came in while still drumming. And I noticed watching it back after the fact, I was like, oh my God, every single one of my limbs, including my head, is doing a different thing. And like, to me, it's second nature and I don't think about it. But when I was detached and watching the footage and watching it happen, I was like, what the crap is this?
I understand that too. When I'm playing a complicated riff and I want to get it, say, on paper and start slowing it down, especially if it's not in 4/4 time signature. And for those listening who aren't really familiar with music terms, that's literally what it sounds like when the beat is 1, 2, 3, 4, when you can count it like that. And that's pretty much the foundation of all modern music. But when you get into other time signatures, which we're not going to do right now. Nope. So again, the complicated things, trying to get it on paper. Once I slow it down, that's when I realize, whoa, wait, what are my fingers doing right now?
Yeah, it's weird when you remove yourself from the performance and like really analyze what it is you're doing. Because it's so easy to be impressed by other musicians. And then simultaneously so easy to be critical of yourself. But when you're able to like write something down or watch footage or listen to a recording back, it's cool to be able to appreciate like, oh man, a lot of skill goes into this thing that I just dick around with all day.
Yeah, that's a hard barrier with music that I struggle with all the time. Is you'll run across someone, that you consider far more talented than yourself, and it's difficult to put yourself aside and say that, they're amazing, but you also have to remember that you do have your own skill and you have to be proud of that. And that's a struggle that I work on all the time when it comes to music.
Yeah, it's a big barrier I've been breaking through recently with covering one of my favorite albums in its entirety. Was my whole life listening to this thing and being like, oh, like this is the holy grail of albums. No one will ever do this again. When I'm, 13, 14 years old, now I'm 31, looking at it like, you know what? I think I can do that.
I think I got this, guys. Well, and that's got to be a good feeling too, because you've been doing it so long. But as we were saying, you've been playing music a long time. But when did you start recording? When could you pinpoint the year you started?
Yeah, it was pretty much maybe a year and a half. So maybe like early 2005 after I started playing drums. I started, my bandmates would leave their instruments at my house because I'm the drummer, right? Like everyone leaves their stuff at the drummer's house. That's just what it is.
That's the easiest way. You have the space if you have the drums, typically.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So in between band practices, I would pick up their instruments and start trying to learn them. And my sister had a tape recorder because she was doing something with sociology. So she would interview people with it. So this tape recorder was laying around. And so with my, 15-year-old allowance or paper route money or whatever, I had acquired a second tape recorder. And so my first ever recording, I played drums while one tape recorder was recording. Hit play on that tape recorder next to the other tape recorder, so the drums would play into it while I played guitar. And that's how I did overdubbing before I realized, oh, you can do this in a computer.
Well, and that was something I was really hoping would come up, is growing up in the 2000s, being into music and wanting to get the audio recorded. I have seen so many makeshift recording devices now, and that's one of the more beautiful ones I've heard of.
Because it's strictly analog, right? Like it was 2005.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Digital recording was a thing, but I was so not really part of any musical community yet at the time that I had no idea what anything was or how anything worked. I just knew I liked music. So I was like, oh, this, captures sound. So I will use it to capture sound.
Well, I can think of the first time I ever recorded something. Me and my little brother, for fun, we took a dollar store microphone into the laptop or computer we had at the time, and he was using a box and a plastic barrel to do drums.
Awesome.
And I was playing a riff that we had written together. And I just remember we were so stoked to record that and show our parents later. And they were so stoked to hear it that that was kind of my first, hey, music's cool when you share it with people moment.
That's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, and I mean, me and my little brother have always been thick as thieves, so to have that memory with him too especially is great. We still play music anytime we have the chance to get together now. Life gets in the way, but he came up for a tattoo a few weeks ago, and one of the first things we did when he sat down and after we poured the coffee was bust out the guitar and bass and start jamming.
Man, I love that. That's so... I don't know, because there is something really magical about sharing music, and especially being able to connect with someone on that level where that's just kind of like you have a relationship outside of it, but also this unique relationship within it on top of that.
Yeah, and music connects people in such a way that there's a handful of guys I can think of off the top of my head where, even though it's been a few years since we've caught up, I know that if you put us in a room with instruments, we would be rocking out, within the half hour. Former bandmates like Nico DeFrance come to mind. I don't think I've ever jammed with a drummer that felt more like peanut butter and jelly than him.
Yeah, he because as a drummer myself, I've rarely played drums in bands. He was the first drummer I was in a band with that I was okay with it from like an egotistical, I'm a drummer standpoint. When Nico plays drums, I'm like, yeah, that's what I would play. And at the same time, because I was the primary songwriter in the band we were in together, when I would write drum parts, he wouldn't, get all up in arms about it because he'd be like, yeah, that's what I would write anyway.
Putting the ego aside in a band is, I've struggled with it, so I can easily say it's one of the most difficult things. And Nico never had that. Ever.
Never. And it's honestly, it's one of the most important things, like from producing so many bands and so many artists. I've sort of come to learn that every band, whether they like it or not, has the guy that writes stuff. And everyone dreams of like, oh, I want to get four dudes in a room and we write everything together. And that hasn't really happened since like the 80s, maybe even earlier on a large scale. Like really, most bands are a way for a songwriter to drive their vision forward. And everyone else is like, they add their flair, but in most bands, it's the guitarist and everyone else just sort of like puts their part to that song, but it's still that dude's song at the end of the day.
It's a very true statement that I can say safely my first band, as it was me, my brother, and his two lifelong friends, that was maybe the only band experience I've had where it felt like an equal membership, where every single person put in the same effort into the songs or bringing songs to the table. But thereafter, I would agree that pretty much any project I've been part of, it's either, like you said, there's the songwriter whose songs we're bringing to life, or the odd time where it's like, hey, this is the full song I've completed. It's going to be one of the band songs, if that's cool.
Yeah. That's it's not to say that four people can't get in a room together and make songs happen, but often, it is, one dude's vision and hopefully other people are on board.
It goes as far back as the Beatles, right?
Yeah, 100%.
You have John songs, you have Paul songs, you have Ringo songs, and you have George songs. The fact we classify them as that really shows what we're saying it is true.
Yeah, like even though they each had their own songs, they were sort of laying the foundation of you don't have to write everything all at the same time all together.
No, and it's kind of cool when a band has their own voice within the band. I think that's a really neat feature if it can be done properly. And I mean, the Beatles are the Beatles for a reason. They're going to be the prime example of that, obviously.
Yeah, I think is totally different world, but Blink-182, where you have Mark songs and Tom songs.
Oh my goodness, yeah. There's Tom songs and there's Mark songs.
And they're both Blink-182 songs, but they're really distinct.
Yep. Another one to mention, Mastodon again. The guitar player and the bassist, very different vocal sets, and they very much had their own songs. And very cool. Later on, the drummer actually started to sing. So
that's cool.
There was the three very different voices contributing to the project.
Sum 41 is a band where like it's Derek's project. Like Sum 41 is Derek Whibley, and everyone else just like shows up and does their part.
They just put out an album or are putting out an album, believe it or not.
I think both. I've kept up with them. Like I contributed to the it was 13 Voices, I think, was their like big comeback album. I contributed to the crowdfunding of that one. When I heard they were coming back and they were crowdfunding it, I was like, you know what? I'll pre-buy a Sum 41 record any day of the week.
When it comes to crowdfunding and stuff, I always feel like I'm a day late and a buck short. I always just miss out on the ones that I either want to take part of or the really cool ones.
Yep, that's most of the case for me too, but I was lucky that I must have just had nothing going on that day, because usually I'm too busy to notice what's going on in the world, but just showed up in my email or my Facebook feed or something, and it was like, oh, Sum 41 crowdfunding, and I was like, holler, I'm in.
So you said the first time you recorded was with that awesome cassette setup.
Yeah.
But what was the first, I'm going to call it professional, let's say professional band recording that you did? And why did you keep recording your own music? Was it the joy in it, or was it a necessity for a band?
So I'll start with the reason I really got into recording was I didn't have a ton of friends growing up. And I wasn't into like partying or drugs or anything. All I had was music. But because of not having a lot of friends, I didn't have guys or like-minded musicians around to make that music with. So I started recording everything because it was the only way to play drums and guitar and bass and sing with myself. So that's where it came from. Was just sort of what I try to do for other people in my job, is take an idea that's in my head and make it real. As far as the first setup I had, I wouldn't say this was a professional setup, but it's when I started getting results that, like, at the time I felt proud of, was with We Are Adam West. And what we did was we had 4 knockoff SM58 microphones and this 4-channel mixer. And so we would specifically with drums was when we would use all four at once. We would have like,
Now, did you know they were knockoffs, or
Yes.
was that something you found out later?
oh no, we
Okay,
knew.
okay.
Like we were broke kids.
Okay,
Yeah.
just making sure, just making sure.
Yeah, I think one was
I
real.
bought knockoffs and found out the hard way down the road.
No, they were like, they looked like 58s, but they weren't.
Classic.
You know, like it's
Okay,
just that
beautiful.
gray grill on them sort of thing. But I mean, they all do relatively the same thing. So the drums would be recorded with one laying inside the pillow on the kick drum, one pointed at the snare drum, and I didn't understand overhead mics yet. So I had the toms mic'd and just depended on the cymbal bleed to get the cymbal, yeah.
Now, for everyone listening at home, as you're explaining this setup, knowledge now down the road, how would you set that up differently just to contrast how wild of a setup that is?
Well, I mean, honestly, with using those same microphones, like if I was thrown into that room with that gear and had to do it all over again, I'd probably do it the same way. And so that went into a mixer, which we like digital recording wasn't quite really a thing yet. So it was the RCA cable into the mini jack into the computer's microphone input.
Well, that's actually one of the notes here that I had, is that so many of the bands when we were teenagers were just doing off the floor recordings.
Yep.
And off the floor means you just have one mic in the room with the band and you play the song, record it, call it a day. So many bands when we were in high school, they would put their demos out like that just to have them out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really does separate you from the pack automatically, that you're taking the time to record everything individual and make a proper recording.
Yeah, and what's weird is like at the time I did not think like, oh, I'm gonna overdub, like this is what professionals do. It was out of necessity because that's how I learned, because I didn't have anyone else to play with. But in retrospect, you're absolutely right. Everyone was doing these off the floor demos, and they probably like sounded better, but in terms of how far you could take the song, overdubbing was kind of the way to go, because you could, you know, mess up the drum part and not ruin everyone else's day that we all have to record the song again. You can just take your time on the drums, focus on that, get it perfect, move on, which adds this attention to detail that you really can't have with off-the-floor stuff.
No, and the better and better audio gear was getting throughout the years, too. It made those off-the-floor recordings so much more glaring when you would listen to it on your computer or speakers that... you kind of almost were forced to go to a studio, even if it was some guy who had a bunch of mics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think guys with microphones, the way you just put it, is the best way to put it.
There's a difference between a guy with microphones who knows what he's doing and a guy with microphones.
Yeah, there's guys with microphones and producers.
So you touched on the first thing kind of being with your band, We Are Adam West. So how did you learn a proper recording process? I mean, Google wasn't the beast it is today.
Nope.
And that's a thing that I really want to get across while talking to you today is things are so accessible nowadays that making your own music, the tools are at your fingertips and there's a lot of free resources. I myself, the pod, we're recording using a lot of free tools. And just thinking of the setup I have today, 10 years ago, I would need so much more and just the plugins, the monitor, as we were talking about before off the pod.
Yeah, I mean, the gear and the information, like both of them weren't really readily available. Like YouTube was created, I think, in 2005, which is when I started really diving into recording. So like
2005 and didn't have a catalog until the next 2-3 years.
So I was making this thing on the fly. So the resources I had were trial and error. Those were the two that I had. Like there was nothing to search. There was nothing to read that I knew about. So it was just a matter of putting microphones against instruments and hitting record, going, oh, that sounds terrible. You know, retuning the instrument or moving the microphone or both, hitting record again. Okay, that sounds more or less terrible, and just kind of calibrating from there, over, weeks and weeks and weeks before you have the drum sound you want.
The true definition of self-taught.
Yeah, like 100. And then once I had, I was already doing things the wrong way for years before I had the means to start doing things the right way. So that first setup with the 4 busted microphones and the mixer into the analog input was, this whole, 3-4 year era of my life where I recorded Near Impossible that way, Last Chance Marie, From This Memory, At Fall's End, Stan Nugent's first couple albums, all super ghetto. And then it wasn't until 2012, I think, I actually got an audio interface, which allowed me to record, up to 8 microphones and then have each microphone on a separate channel in the computer and actually finally start mixing.
Yeah, probably right around Theatria time, I remember.
Right after.
You really... Oh, after. Yeah. So
even Theatria was the ghetto setup.
I'm glad we're talking about this. Again, something I wanted to get across to, and we were discussing this off pod before we started. The debate about gear and the cost needed to have the proper setup. You will run into a lot of people who will tell you if you don't spend the best and biggest dollars on everything, that you're not going to get the quality. But one of my favorite things about you, Todd, is how many albums have been recorded with that Les Paul Jr. and how much did that cost you?
I want to say it was $75 and it came with a little PV amp. I still have it. I still use it. So it's probably been featured on at least 20 records.
And you wouldn't know it unless we told you, like, right now that it's not, a higher end mid-range Les Paul type deal.
Yeah, like it's used on a couple of Vicky Vale songs, which their album Volume 3 to this day is probably one of the albums I'm most proud of, even though we recorded that back in 2013, 2014.
It is not that long now.
It's been that long, man.
Well, that's to this day one of my favorite post-hardcore albums I've ever heard.
Man, thank you.
I'm super stoked that it was made and written by friends. So, like you said, you didn't have many resources to learn, and it was all simply trial and error. And that's a really important thing, too, to say that it's okay to fail. I played bass, I'd say, 7 out of the 10 years before I realized I was picking improperly and had to reteach myself how to properly pick again after 7 years of doing it, right?
Yeah, to this day, there's, I guess, a proper way to hold a pencil and a way that toddlers do it. So I hold a pencil like a toddler. I hold a pick like I hold a pencil. So not only am I not picking correctly, I'm basing my incorrect picking pattern on an incorrect handwriting pattern. I just want to read you real quick before we move on. Someone asked me recently how, they said, teach me music. I'm just reading it off here from Messenger. So, they wanted to learn how to get good at music. And so I told them, suck hard and suck often. And eventually it wears off. That's really the only way.
It's the best advice I could give. I have several tattoos, and one of the things I've said to people is I didn't know what a good tattoo was until I got bad ones.
Yep.
So very similar, yeah. Now, Todd, you were very, very involved in our local music scene to the point where when we finally met, you were almost a household name within our town. So it's very interesting to say that one of the things that led you to recording was that you didn't have many friends, weren't popular.
Yeah.
And that the reason that led you to recording made you exactly the opposite. It made you popular and had friends, at least when we met. So it's kind of cool that an outlet you used to escape reversed why you needed it to escape.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. Especially because, I don't know, there's always been something specifically with punk culture that it's always felt like this island of misfit toys to me, where it's like
it's okay.
Yeah, everyone can come together and be their weird, quirky, broken self and not be expected to not be that.
I've always referred to it as the counterculture.
Yeah, that's definitely, there's a subsect of when you textbook punk is definitely counterculture. But even a scale back away from punk music and the political side of it and wearing all black and stuff like that, there's this ethos of punk rock that is basically, this is me. And to me, that's the most punk thing, is just showing up as you are and letting that be what it is. rather than, having to pierce your nose and having to spike your hair and having to scream about the government and all that stuff. Just showing up, showing up and doing you, to me, has always been the most punk thing. So like Childish Gambino, I would say, is like one of the biggest punk artists right now, because he just does what he wants to do and lets that
I wanted
be what
to get
it
that
is.
into that. Punk isn't just a music. Punk is more a lifestyle, really. It's not punk is a genre, but punk's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a whole
way
thing.
of life. So being so involved in the local music scene as well, I would say not only did you help many bands in our town get their music out, but not only encouraged but inspired many people to start doing music. I know that me and my band, we reached out to you to record our early songs because we knew that you did that. That's what you did.
Yeah, what's bizarre to me is you were probably like the third band I ever recorded. Like, it's not like I was
that early. Wow.
Like I mean, it was still in Belleville, right?
Yeah, it was in your basement on a
Pringle
Bongyard. Pringle,
yeah.
Pringle and Bongyard.
Yeah, on the corner there. But like, to me, having you guys reach out to me, and like I didn't know you yet, or if I did, it was like in passing sort of thing. So
it was through shows at best. Yeah.
So for you to reach out to me and be like, "Hey, you're that guy that records," to me, I wasn't that guy. I was like, it's what I did. Like, I was a guy who recorded, but I didn't think I was anyone or anything yet. Like, that was probably the first time I think anyone ever like looked at me and was like, "Oh, that's that guy that records."
And that's funny to hear it from that end, because to us, you were that guy already. So it's funny how just word of mouth can have you have a perception of something.
It's bizarre.
That might not even be, yeah. But I know that personally, after Near Impossible, which was my first band, we worked on a bunch of my acoustic songs together.
Yep.
You sang on a good portion of them. And then in our college years, we were in a band together that was called Diatria.
Yeah.
Now, how do you find writing music in a group versus the solo dynamic? We touched on that a bit earlier, but you've just done so much of it now and worked with so many different groups. How do you keep Todd and the band?
Wow. Well, in the context of me in a band, it's always pretty much been a case of like, this sounds awful to say out loud, but like, I'm going to do my thing. And if other people want to be part of it, that's awesome. If not, that's awesome too. They can all go do their own thing. But like, I'm very much of the mindset that like, I'm writing a song because I have an idea in my head and I need it out the way it's in my head. And very few people over the years, and this is why you'll notice over the past 10 years, I've been a lot less active in bands and more active in helping other bands out, is because I'm so anal and neurotic that it's really hard for me to maintain relationships without bruising egos in that musical sense when it's that intimate and when it is regarding my songs. But within working with other bands, it's a lot easier because I only work with bands that I like. And that's on a both personal and musical level. So if I don't know what the band wants to do, I don't get involved. If I do know what the band wants to do, I'm pretty upfront with what that is and how we need to get there. And I'm not above, and I think people appreciate this about me, is I'm not gonna dance around people's feelings. If you're making the song we're working on bad, I'm gonna let you know that the things that are being presented are making the song bad.
Right, but I've known you so long that it's never come across in a rude way. It's always felt constructive. It always feels like it's coming from a good place, not a I know better or am better than you sort of place.
Oh, and the reason for that is I sort of like come as the ambassador speaking on behalf of the song that exists in the ether that no one else has heard yet. So I'm not coming, the way I see it anyway, I'm not coming with my opinions and my preferences. I'm saying there's a song that exists and we need to bring it to life. And I think that's why it doesn't come off as rude, is because I'm not saying I know better. I'm saying the song wants something else.
Yeah, and like I briefly said at the start of the podcast, I had come to you with legitimately a 3-minute chord progression that I had the lyrics to. And I told you, hey, I kind of hear a choir and like strings in this song. Wouldn't that be cool? And I remember too, leaving, my ride had come, so I had to finish my vocal take and literally run out the door and be like, okay, thanks, finish this.
Yeah, because we weren't sitting there working on the choir and stuff together. That was me at like 2 in the morning.
Well, and that's what I'm really enjoying about having this podcast actually as an outlet to talk to people in specific fields. Last week we talked to Taylor about dungeon mastering and all the work that actually goes into a session. And I've had a lot of people come to me since that episode came out and say they had no idea how much work their dungeon master was actually putting into a campaign.
Yep.
And that they were going to go thank them. One of the similar things I think people need to realize is how much effort not goes only into one single song, but an entire album.
Yeah.
Again, having lived with you and worked with you so many times, I have seen this man stay up to sunrise, sitting in front of the computer, editing songs that hours and hours ago anyone else would have considered completed.
Yeah.
So the love and care you put into your music, I think, is why people want to keep working with you and why your name did rise so quickly.
That makes a lot of sense, because I've been sort of scratching my head for the past, 12, 13 years of like, man, why do people still want me to make their songs? But when you say it like that, you're right. Most people will call a song done way before I will.
Way before you will.
Yeah.
When we recorded songs together, I remember several times even saying, okay, cool, it's done, because I was anxious to get it up and online and share it. And you just shake your head, no, go back to work. And I'm like, okay, I'll go play N64.
Yeah, you go do something for the next 3 days. I'll emerge after I shower and wash the song off me, and I'll show you what I've done.
But that's also not to get the wrong idea across to people that everything is going to take forever. No. That's just to emphasize the care you put into things. And like you said, see in 3 days, that's a good way to put it, because it could be done in 12 hours, could be 3 days.
Yep.
But as an artist myself anyway, I've always taken that as, hey, he's got my baby and he's taking real good care of it before he brings it home to me.
Yeah, that's something that I bake into all my contracts, is that I refuse to charge by time, because things are going to take as long as they need to.
Right. And I told you today, even I give the benefit of booking my day when I have an interview plan, just in case there's technical difficulties, or even just to chat beforehand to kind of, And I mean, that time is needed for art in general, because art can't be rushed.
No, like it can happen quickly, but it can't be rushed.
You're bringing something into existence that wasn't there prior. It can't be rushed.
No, it can't. You're literally in that moment within the universe of whatever work of art you're doing. You're God, and whether you create it in a day or it takes you an eternity, you need to create the thing.
When we went to school together, like I was saying, you didn't go for audio engineering. What did you take in school?
So I did a year of human resources.
Okay.
Because it was the closest I could get to being a lawyer without having to go to university. and I also, I thought going in, I thought human resources were there to help the employees. So after the year of doing it, I learned you're just an underpaid lawyer working on behalf of the corporation. I noped out of it and dropped out. So the second year I did marketing, and then we did a unit on what marketing is. Obviously it's marketing school, and funeral homes sort of tipped me off, because marketing is identifying a need in the marketplace and filling it. And there's something really evil, in my opinion, about monetizing the fact that every day or someday everyone's going to die. To me, that's messed up, and I wanted no part of it. So I dropped out of marketing.
And you can't stick with something that you don't have a passion for or you have an issue with. You're just going to be unhappy if you do.
Yeah, and I thought maybe I could do that. That's why I went to college in the first place, because I knew in high school I wanted to record for a living. And for some reason, I just didn't really start until I dropped out of college twice.
Well, and I always knew I wanted to be involved in the arts. So when we went to school together there, I went for theater, and it actually just ended up killing my passion for it because of how negative and cutthroat the industry from the inside was turning out to be. I still am actually finding that recently. Last year, I was looking to get back into acting before the world ended up doing what it did. And pretty much every actor that I reached out to would hit me with that wall of negativity, followed by just a reluctance to help, in the sense like none of my actor friends wanted to put me in touch with their agents or anything like that. Music does have that edge to it, but there's also that brotherhood where if you find out someone plays an instrument, it's like, oh, dude, what do you play? How long you been playing? And I think that appeal with music, too, is always going to have it be maybe not the career I pursue, but very, very special to me. Well, and something I'll never quit.
Well, I think the reason you see that more in music is it's such, especially in like the sort of punk scene, it's so community focused that you can't be that guy who, you know, won't tell his friend's band where he did his record. You can't be that guy, because then no one will want to work with you, no one will want to play shows with you, and all of a sudden you're an accountant who used to have a band.
Well, and one of the things that I like to be transparent with is that I lived a lot of years negatively and not the way as an adult now that I wish I did. And one of the things that has always bothered me is how competitive I was in the music scene. When it came to booking shows or just playing with other bands, I had that I'm better than you attitude. Your band sucks. The regret I have with that is it can't be quantified. It's just a feeling that's always going to stick with me.
Yeah, that's something I'm really fortunate that like I've never personally had, and might be why I'm still doing music professionally to this day, is that I've always been sort of like a socialist when it comes to stuff like that, because it's like, oh, I figured out this cool recording technique. I want to show someone so that they can do the thing. And so every band I work with, I don't have secrets. I show everyone my process inside and out, and I'm no stranger to, you know, helping my friends figuring out their recording setups so they can record their own songs rather than, oh, I'm a producer, why don't you hire me?
Well, when we lived together, actually, that was one of the things, too. I kept coming to you to record the songs because I kept writing them. Yep. And I remember that day we went down to Long and McQuaid, and I thought you were getting something, and you're like, all right, Austin, you're getting a monitor and a mic and a guitar, and you're going to start recording your own music.
Yep.
And, you know, you were there to help me with the things that weren't obvious, but the things that I could have figured out on my own, like you said, with trial and error.
Yep.
You didn't baby me, which I appreciated because I did learn quite a bit in the process.
Yeah, it's so important to just do it. Like, make a bunch of bad songs and finish them and put them out, and they're going to suck, and people are going to tell you they suck, and that's going to motivate you to make less bad songs so that less people tell you you suck.
I mean, the thing I always like to tell people about when I played music, I always did it for me, and I remember vividly playing coffee house shows where the people in the quiet coffee house were talking louder than I was playing.
That's a thing.
Yep. And I just finished the set because I wasn't there for them. I was there for me to get my art out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I've played countless shows where I couldn't hear my own band because the pub chatter was so loud. That's just kind of what it is, you know? Like no one owes you their attention ever at any point in your entire life. No one ever owes you that. So it's magical when you have it, and it's fine when you don't, because that's just kind of how it is.
And there's no rhyme or reason with it either.
Nope.
When we were in Theatri, we had some traction there, and we were doing the back-to-back Ontario shows there. I remember one night, the night we were hyped up for in St. Catharines.
Yep, I remember.
And we had the most traction for. It was a packed house. It was by far one of the least favorite shows I've ever played in my life.
Yeah.
There was something just so weird, and the vibe there was bad. Everyone talked over us. We had so many audio issues, and the engineer refused to fix our monitors and stuff for us during our set. Your mic went out and he just told you to take mine. It was just a nightmare. Whereas the next night we played at what was a metal show, and our band wasn't necessarily metal. It was heavy, but it wasn't metal. And we played first, and not only did the band let me use their bass amp, the crowd there, it was 20 people. I would love to go back and play that venue again.
Was that the Rock Pile in Etobicoke?
It was, what was the gentleman's name? Rick something?
Oh, Rick! That would have been in like Brantford or something.
Brantford with Rick.
Yep.
Yes. He was such a gracious,
I love that guy.
Gracious host. I've never had a promoter make me feel like I'm hanging out with an uncle.
Yep.
As much as that guy did.
That's why everyone calls him Uncle Rick, because he's just the most solid, grounded bro. And
again, it's that kind of thing that I'm going to remember the rest of my life, whereas I've met through our years in music, I've met semi-famous musicians, 2 famous musicians, and majority of them leave a bad taste in my mouth because of that ego we were talking about before. And I'm a very respectful person. I'll never approach someone in that, this is an obvious don't approach someone kind of moment. But I won't say any names. I met one of my favorite Canadian musicians once in a record shop, and he didn't even acknowledge that I said, "Hey man, love your music. It's really inspired me in my life." Oof. He kind of gave me the grunt.
Wow.
And so ever since then, I haven't been a fan of his music because personality is such a big thing for me.
Well, because music is an expression of the artist, and so you connect with the expression. There's a clear line, like it's not a creepy stalker thing. You're connecting with the person, and so when that happens, it feels like they lied to you your whole life,
And especially if they have lyrics that are so personal, it feels like they're singing to you.
Yep.
And that was definitely my experience there, and that's why I say I've got such regret when it comes to how I treated other people in music, is because I wasn't aware that that's their art and their voice, and I'm shitting on it. And again, it's something that, all I can do is apologize to those people and work on being better and acknowledging, the mistakes that I made.
I think, to me, the biggest thing has always been with apologies is to live the apology, because anyone can say, "I'm sorry." And like a lot of people are like, "Oh, it takes a big man to apologize." Like, no, it takes a weak, scared man who's good at lying to apologize. It takes a big man to grow and learn and change.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I would rather reach out, apologize, admit I'm wrong, and not hear back from the person than leave it on
100%.
a bad note.
Yep.
This is kind of a perfect bridge to one of the main things I wanted to talk with you today about. And one of the big things that I struggle with in my life is mental health. And I know not only do you have the same struggles that I do, but you're also on the vocal advocate side that I'm trying to be as well, to let people know they're not alone. So this is 100% something I wanted to talk about. And I know I made sure it was okay with you beforehand. How has mental health affected your career, both in the negative sense, but as well as the positive? Because I know personally, when I'm at my lowest lows in my depressions, that's when I find I write the most music. And maybe it's a self-life raft, a form of self-preservation, and I'm just not aware of it. But I do find in my lows is when I write a lot of music. And I feel that in itself is a positive that comes with the negative of mental health.
Yeah, I'll tackle this one in 2 parts. So there's
please do.
There's how my mental health affects my career, and then there's also how my career affects my mental health. Because those are, those are 2 completely different conversations. But I'll try to not go on too long about either.
And I guess I didn't think of it that way because I don't have a career per se to think of it like that.
Right, like you're not embedded in the sort of the same. Yeah. So, what was the first half again?
So how does your mental health affect? So how does your mental health affect your career?
So the way that my mental health affects my career is it's rough because the care I put into my work, I want things to be perfect or as close to perfect as they can be. When a depressive episode hits, it's really hard to see the good in anything. And so when you're a perfectionist who can't see the good in anything, it makes it really easy to spend days and days and days and weeks making a good song progressively worse by
just because you're trying to finish something because of the perfectionist coming out through that.
Yeah, so you're chasing the dragon because you're in a depressive episode. If you don't recognize it and take it for what it is, and you still chase that dopamine hit of like, oh, the song's perfect now. If your brain's not going to give you the chemical, you're not going to hit that point no matter how good the song sounds. So it's been a learning experience over the years of sort of my favorite quote from Community is kind of my life motto. It's better than good. It's good enough. Finding that point. It's something it's a funny line, but I take it very seriously in my day to day, because it's like there does reach a point where something is just good enough and that has to be okay. So it's hard too with the long hours of some recording days will go 12, 14, 16 hours. If you're in a low mental state, you might only have 6 hours in you. And so trying to find a way to make that work without disappointing the artist or collapsing the whole project because, you don't have the energy to put in it. It gets really tricky. But at the same time, because of the nature of how open I am with my mental health struggles, I've been really fortunate that my clients have been understanding. So even like I spent from, I think it was like late 2017 until early 2020, I quit music wholesale. I didn't touch it. And then I came back and a lot of my old clients were like, oh my God, you're back. Let's do a record right now. So I spent, the summer that COVID-19 hit, alternating between self-isolating between clients and then finishing all these cool records of people that knew that once I was ready, I would come back and do the thing. So one band in particular is Last Chance Marie. When I quit, we were almost done their album that's coming out, I believe February 2nd. This is Just Sound. And so we'd spent a really long time making this record, and then I quit. And I gave them the option. I was like, can I pay you guys back and have someone else finish the record sort of thing? And I don't even think it was a conversation. I don't even think that was acknowledged. They were just kind of like, nah, you'll finish it when you can. So that was kind of neat, was someone having faith in me through a multi-year low in my life, actually still just waiting it out because of the connection we have.
And that's a huge testament to the relationship that you have with them, because Last Chance Marie, they've been going, I don't want to exaggerate, but I feel like they've been a band for nearly, 18 years.
Something like that. I did their first demo way back in the same house where we did the Near Impossible record. Mm-hmm. I've been working with them forever.
So to take a 3-year break when they've been going for so long, to me, that is the biggest sign of love and respect given. And I'm familiar with the guys in the band. They're all sweethearts, but if it wasn't them, I'm sure any other band you were working with too that knew you would give that same respect.
100%. I don't know that any band should go on a 3-year hiatus just because their producer's having a mental breakdown. But I was also working with Thrown to the Wolves at the time. I was working with Lungless. I was just wrapping up the Fortunate Losers record that was the only one that I think didn't get delayed. Because of what I was going through.
I was few projects on the go.
I was juggling a lot. Yeah,
different genres too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I was maybe working on 6 or 7 records at the time, and it was just sort of this thing where I was trying to work through the depression instead of actually treating it, and so it culminated in this extended break where these bands just kind of had to find other things to do, which I think I hold against myself way more than they ever held against me.
And now you said you were working with 6 different groups at the time. How many, after your hiatus, as we were calling it, how many were still there to work with?
Oh God. Thrown to the Wolves still exists. I believe they found someone else, and they're still recording, and that makes me really happy. Lungless broke up shortly after I disappeared, which was heartbreaking. But they finished the record we were working on with Jay Moss in, I want to say he's in Baltimore. But they went to the States to finish that one.
And I assume you sent the project files you had worked on down his way.
We had only tracked one song. So there was really nothing to send. They just completely redid the whole record. So we were working on one single that would then become the full record in later sessions. And it was like right at the finish line of that single, I was just kind of like, guys, I can't.
And as much as you get to work with people too in your day-to-day, a good portion of it is spent alone, which can't be easy either.
Well, especially I was living alone in this 4-bedroom house.
And that was the one out in the country, right?
Yeah, it was in Wooler. So I had no
so
one.
You were out there.
Yeah, I had no one keeping tabs on me. So I got to this point, and this is where the career started affecting the mental health, was I had this idea in my head that if I wasn't working really hard on music at any given moment, literally any given moment, someone else was, and that person would be the one to like still be recording in their 40s and not me. So I was sleeping in these like 4-hour spurts twice a week, using hallucinations as my alarm clock to go to bed. So that extended sleep deprived, like literally a full year of my life, I had 100 naps. Like I didn't sleep a full night and I had 100 naps. So
sleep is one of the biggest ones that I get affected with as well. And I remember one of the saving graces for my mental health when we lived together was walking out into the kitchen at 2 a.m. and you sitting in those theater chairs, those theater chairs we had. And, you know, just having the ability to not be alone through that was such a saving grace. So again, the long hours alone can't help. I know that personally, anytime I've worked in a solo one-man kitchen, my mental health is at its lowest because you're literally not around anyone for 8 to 12 hours, depending on the shift, just to go home to have your roommates or partner be asleep to wake up and repeat. And it's also a field, you know, cooking, the industry, where you don't have job satisfaction in the sense that your hard work, it's always erased. So you prep the food, to cook the food, to put it out, and you don't get to see the people's reactions when you're in the kitchen. You don't get to see them enjoying the food, and then all the work you've done throughout the day is gone and you just have to repeat it the next day. So it's pretty grueling in the sense that you don't have any like physical thing to look at to feel like you've accomplished anything.
Right.
So
like even with recording, I've got the record once I'm done. I at least have that.
Yeah.
And I can listen to it
so
all
if
day.
it was hard, so if that was a hard time, at least at the end, you can have something to either look back and be proud on or not, depending on the album.
It happens.
And well, and I've actually had that in some of my notes here as well. I was going to ask you projects that you're most proud of and least proud of. And for the least proud of ones, I want to know like why, because I know with you, it's going to have nothing to do with the band, which is, I feel a lot of music producers, if they put out a bad album, they will stick it on the band, which isn't fair.
And that's not how I roll.
No.
So what I'm most proud of, I'm really proud of Vicky Vale, specifically Volume 3, because that was sort of that like new plateau of like, oh, I can make a record that sounds this good. All the stuff I did with the band Lungless was always a step up. In terms of their songwriting, my ability to coax vocal performances out of them, the sound of the productions was always amazing. There's a band no longer together, but they were called Fall from Triumph from Sweden. I got to mix one of their records, and it was awesome. I was really proud of that.
How on earth did you connect with a band from Sweden?
My YouTube mixing show. they saw that I was a mixing guy on the internet, so they wanted me to mix their record, and it was pretty sweet. I'm really proud of the Last Chance Marie record that's about to come out. It took me, 4 years or whatever, but it's done and it's coming out. And so they had worked on it with another producer. This album is 12 years in the making. So it got stuck in limbo with this one guy for years and years and years. And
so this is that same album that when I left town, they were working on.
Yes.
Wow.
But it's so good. Like
Well, if they're listening to this, guys, very proud of you for sticking to that.
Yeah, I'm thrilled on a personal level that like it was sort of like killing one of my demons. Was this thing that I left hanging when I quit music. I got to come back and slay. But also it's just a really good record.
Yeah, they've always had more heart than any other band in the room.
100%.
A real musician would recognize that. And again, nothing but respect for that band, especially to have something that long that they want to get out and keep working towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the determination, like they did an EP while that one was in limbo. So like it's called Is It Well, I believe is the name of the EP that we did. And so it was 5 songs we put out while the other producer still had their record in purgatory. And so after doing that EP was when they were like, okay, let's finish this thing, but we'll just do it again from scratch.
And so you said that band from Sweden found you through your YouTube tutorials.
I think so,
and
yeah.
Is that, so that's one of the projects you're currently working on?
YouTube tutorials?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called Hardcore Mixing. And after I mix a record, I like to reflect on, some of the things that made it cool and show you how it's done.
And that's awesome because with everyone being not only stuck at home, again, the access to being able to make your own music being so readily available, people are going to be looking for that more and more. And having someone who not only has experience, but is willing to break it down in a digestible manner is a big necessity. So I think that channel will do really well, especially over the course of this year, because
I imagine so, yeah.
do sadly think we're going to be stuck inside a bit longer.
Yeah. But as far as records I'm not proud of, so this band is incredible and the songs are incredible. And when I go back and listen to what we did, there's a band from Belgium called Reach the Shore, who I got to mix one of their albums. And it is so good. And I don't know, like my computer couldn't handle the mixes. And I've never talked to anyone about this ever, but my computer couldn't handle the mixes. So I actually didn't know what the record sounded like until it was done and I sent it to them. So at the moment I remember feeling like, I would have done all this stuff differently and like feeling really guilty for what I perceived to be like a rushed product, but they seemed happy with it. And listening to it.
So how did you edit that? Were you just looking at the WAV files and going from what you knew?
Yep. I would listen to the raw tracks and just sort of memorize what that sounded like and then Rain Man my way through the mixing process at what the EQ would do to that sound that I locked in my head from the raw file. And so I did the whole record like that. I had no idea what it sounded like until it was done. But
I can't even imagine trying to do something like that.
It was insane. I don't know how I did it, but I mean, it sounds pretty good. And I'm also like super not proud of Theatria from a production standpoint.
It's funny too, when I listen to it back on Spotify, the EP of the B-side sounds better than the 12-track album.
Oh, 100%. And I think like the Green album sounds pretty good, but like it sounds fine. And when I'm me being how I am and working as hard as I do for other artists, to put out my own album and have it sound fine is messed up.
I mean, during that time though, we both were going through so much, and I think that reflects in the album.
Yeah.
Lyrically, audibly, all of it.
Well, especially like the songs Essentialism and Prestique are like super, you can tell I'm going through some stuff in all the lyrics I wrote through the whole album. It's pretty messed up. But I mean, that one, like, you know how Theatria is sort of my baby and I write all the stuff? The Green album, I only wrote 2 of the songs. Brandon actually wrote the whole thing. And then I snuck in 2 songs because it was just like, I was just so broken I couldn't write.
So the songwriting aside, though, why was the mixing on the Green album better?
I don't think it was that much better. Like it was in the height of my career. Like I don't know. I think the Green album should have sounded a lot better, which is why it's one of the ones I'm not proud of, because it was just really there was so much depth and struggle and honesty in the lyrics and in the songwriting that I think I didn't do my job as a producer conveying. So in the new Theatria, I expect it to be a lot better because I coming back after 3 years, if I can like be unhumble for a second, you can't tell I stopped for 3 years.
Well, I wasn't aware it was. I mean, I know time flies, but I wasn't aware it was a full 3 years.
Yeah, I didn't touch music for 3 straight years, and then I recorded that May 16th cover. That was the first thing I did. I did a cover of Sacrifice Theory. I finished Last Chance Marie and Patrick Kirkby's albums. And then I jumped into this AFI cover album I'm doing. And then, I don't know, it's like I just sort of, the second it clicked back and I was able to start making music again, it was as if I had kept going and kept developing my skills, which is kind of neat.
And that's got to be a good feeling too. Like, I've been out of the kitchens now for almost 2 years due to a knee injury. But I know that anytime I go above and beyond at home with like busting out the old chef cap, you know what I mean?
Yep.
After I feel so self-fulfilled that I couldn't imagine a 3-year break from music. I know 2 weeks without my bass is like, oh, the training wheels have definitely, you know, they don't stay on.
See, that's what I expected. I expected to come back and spend a year relearning everything. I didn't expect to hit the ground running.
No, and I mean, the fact you have is awesome to see. And from what I've been hearing and seeing, that your AFI covers and that May 16th cover is so good. Like you said, you haven't missed a beat. And if anything, vocally, you're sounding better than ever.
Yeah, it's crazy what sleep can do.
I know. I cut out sugar and started to sleep more, and mood and energy has been so much better since.
It's such a huge change.
We're going to be wrapping up here shortly. A few more questions for you.
Yeah.
I know that one of the big jokes with people in the arts is, you know, oh, what a great way to make your parents unproud of you. And your parents are wonderful, and that's not what I'm getting at. But what are some of the sacrifices you've made in your life to do what you do, to be able to have a studio that's yours, to be able to produce these albums and put them out?
So some of it is stuff I will be correcting sort of in my life as I develop. But back in the Wooler house during that first big round of doing the studio, I sacrificed, you know, my privacy. The bands were coming and living in my house with me, you know, so I was on the clock, whether I was recording or not. To some degree, I was on the clock 24/7. So I definitely sacrificed that, just like having a normal human life where, you know, you hang out naked and watch The Price is Right.
Well, and I wasn't aware that it was being used in the terms band house when you have a recording studio, for those listening. I wasn't aware you were doing band house, but I know that seems to be a popular trend nowadays, is the band houses, especially with needing to isolate 2 weeks before being able to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had 2 sets of bunk beds, and one of them was a double. So I could sleep 5 guys comfortably in my guest room, which I did pretty frequently.
And band guys are used to the floor anyway.
Yeah, so for them, and that's why I got the bunk beds, because I remember being in a band going on tour and having to sleep in the van or on floors or whatever. So offering that, you know, because I know band guys are broke, especially these days, but even back then. And so it's like, if you don't have to pay for a hotel or for gas driving 3 hours each way every day, you know, like that stuff adds up. So just come here, live here for a bit, and we'll make a record. So doing that, I sacrificed a lot of normalcy. I sacrificed a lot of sleep. I sacrificed a lot of health, and ultimately doing it that way, I ended up sacrificing doing music itself, you know, from that 3-year break. So going forward, I plan to make less concessions to the job. I'm going to treat it more like a normal job. You know, I'll work for 8 to 10 hours a day. But then I'm, you know, going to watch CSI with Katie.
And that's really, I had a drama teacher who my 5 years in high school, because of the leap year there, she would always say to me, Austin, one day you'll be great. You just have to find the balance. And I never knew what she was saying. But in the last few years, I really think I'm starting to, in the sense that I can only give so much. I can only do so much. I can only give so much. And in that, I'm really finding balancing my mental health with just unplugging and not trying to be doing everything at once. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I'm so used to being in kitchens that I work hard off the start so they see I'm a good employee. And then because I work hard, a giant portion of workload falls on me. And if that isn't done, then it's on me all of a sudden for not doing said massive workload. And that was a cycle I found I got myself in a lot, but would also blame myself for.
Yeah, that's how I burnt out. Was I would not sleep so that I could keep making music, and then I just became the guy who will work, 120 hours a week. That's who I was. That's what I was known as, and it's what I think I expected of myself more than my clients did, but definitely certain clients of mine expected that out of me too. And they stopped seeing me as a person with physical, mental, or emotional needs and just saw me as a music-making machine, which, in fairness, I was selling myself as that.
And you have to run into, at that point, too, the people who are taking away even more of your personal life by messaging you on your personal accounts, asking music-related questions.
Oh, God. Like, it got to the point where literally I had a client who was demanding their mixes in the form of staking out my house and leaving notes on my door when I would go get groceries.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, for real. That was right around the time. That's when I decided I need to quit. I had one client who screamed in my face for it was at least 5 solid minutes, just screaming in my face about how disappointed he was in me. Because one night at midnight, I said, "It's no longer today, so our session for today is done," and I went to bed. And so that just threw him off. And then this other artist who was staking out my house. So definitely there's a danger to overworking yourself and selling yourself as that overachiever, because people will buy what you're selling and they will expect it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If people have this image of what you are and you don't get that, it's just becomes a problematic situation from the get-go.
Yeah, when you're recording with the guy who doesn't sleep and he stops a session to go sleep, someone did something wrong.
Well, I know that we're ending here on a few of the more difficult things, but for those still listening and those who have always wanted to start making their own music, what advice, Todd, would you have for those people, both in the sense of what they need to do to make sure their music gets recorded, and also maybe in the sense of gear to start out?
I would say, if I were starting from scratch and I wanted to make my band's first demo today with the technology that's available, I would get a laptop somewhere around $800 with an AMD CPU rather than Intel. I say AMD because their latest Ryzen chips are just insane for the money. You get more cores at a faster speed for less money. And so that's just a solid build to start with. If you're recording live drums, I would spring and get, the extra, maybe $500 interface with all 8 inputs. And whatever microphones your budget will allow, which would involve, maybe a couple SM57s and just get cheap Chinese condenser mics for everything else. You'll figure out what sounds good later. But there's like $25 mics on Amazon that sound fine. You don't need crazy expensive gear to make a good sounding record. You just need to know how to use whatever gear you do have.
Well, and I will be making sure to link a bunch of the projects that we've mentioned throughout the episode today, maybe make a Spotify playlist, but I will make sure to indicate which of the songs were recorded on those Chinese knockoff microphones you were talking about, just so people can see the quality they can do with a low budget, because I think that is one of the biggest problems to entry in the field, is people have it in their mind that it's got to be, like I said earlier, very expensive gear. And that's just not true. I mean, me and a friend last year, 2 years ago, I had an acoustic song idea, and we both recorded our parts on our cell phones and smashed them together in audio recorder. You know what I mean? There's ways around it. There's things that can be done. And I want to squish that mentality that it's got to be, very, very costly.
Yeah, the microphone on your phone is most of the cost of the phone. Like, they're really good microphones and cameras, sort of.
I was going to say it's the mic and the camera, yeah.
Like you can make a demo with your phone if you have to. It's totally doable. That's how I demo all the songs when I'm songwriting. I have all this gear around me. I'll make demos on my phone, to get the idea out. That's, to this day, I still do that.
Yeah, when I share songs with friends, when I'm like, oh, I have a really cool riff or really cool vocal hook, I'll record it in sound recorder on my phone and send it over.
Yep.
Now, last thing for you, Todd. I know you've got so much projects probably on the go now that you're back off your hiatus, but where can people find you and what can they look forward to this year coming from you and your studio?
So on Instagram, I am at Todd Barriage. That's probably the best way to follow me. I'm inconsistent with all other forms of social media, but Instagram at TODDBARRIAGE. I try to keep people up to date with audio-visual work there. As far as what you can look forward to from me, that new Last Chance Marie record is coming out that I produced quite shortly. I'm covering AFI's Sing the Sorrow in its entirety on a weekly basis on my YouTube channel, which is /Todd Barriage. And beyond that, there's going to be a new Theatria record, and I'm producing a bunch of stuff. I'm back at it, so look forward to that and the hardcore mixing series continuing.
Well, I know that I probably speak for a lot of people when I say I'm looking forward to all those projects, and more importantly, I'm happy you're off your hiatus and back doing what you do, man.
Thanks, man. Me too. It's weird that I was gone for so long, and it's really good to be back.
It's good to have you back. Love you, buddy, and thanks so much for being here today.
I love you too, man. Thanks for having me on.
Today's episode made possible by the Bomb Squad at Dream Sauce Design Company, at Neats, and at Hebden Beats. Find their links in the descriptions down below. Peace.